Two British nationals who had been jailed in Iran for more than 5 years returned home to their families' hugs and tears on Thursday. This comes after the UK settled about a 40-year-old debt to Iran. Welcome to Kaumudy Global, and we bring to you this story today. The citizens are charity worker Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe and retired civil engineer Anousheh Ashouri. The two arrived via a government-chartered aircraft at the Brice Norton Air Force Base in Oxfordshire in the early morning hours of Thursday. The British government said a third detainee, Morad Tahbas, who holds US, British and Iranian citizenship, was also released from prison on parole as part of the same deal. The breakthrough was reached as world leaders tried to negotiate the return of both Iran and the US to an international agreement aimed at limiting Tehran's nuclear enrichment program. The prisoner issue is something that has been hampering the talks. The release of Zaghari Ratcliffe and Ashouri came as the US, Britain and other countries seek to secure the release of dozens of dual nationals detained by Iran. It may be noted that Iran doesn't recognize their right to hold citizenship in another country. Family members and human rights activists accuse Iran of arresting the dual nationals on cooked-up charges to extract concessions from Western nations. British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss told lawmakers that the change of government in Iran last summer had been instrumental in moving the talks forward. Extensive diplomacy secured the release of the dual nationals and led to agreement to repay the debt in a way that complies with UK and international sanctions. Britain agreed to pay Iran £393.8 million, which will be ring-fenced for humanitarian purposes. The British government but has declined to offer details of the arrangement. While the British government has refused to acknowledge a link between the debt and the detention of the dual nationals, Zaghari Ratcliffe's husband has been outspoken in arguing that Iran was holding her hostage to force Britain to pay. The debt has been a hurdle in British-Iranian relations for more than 40 years. After the Islamic Revolution in 1979, the UK cancelled an agreement with the late Shah of Iran to sell the country more than 1,500 Chieftain tanks. Since the Shah's government had paid in advance, the new Iranian government demanded repayment for the tanks that were never delivered. The two countries have bargained over the debt ever since. Hope for a deal had been growing since Tuesday, March 15th, when the Member of Parliament who represents Zaghari Ratcliffe's neighbourhood in London announced that Iranian authorities had returned her passport. Zaghari Ratcliffe was taken into custody at Tehran's airport in April 2016 as she was returning home to Britain after visiting family in Iran. She had been employed by the Thomson Reuters Foundation, the charitable arm of the news agency, but she was on vacation at the time of her arrest. Zaghari Ratcliffe was sentenced to 5 years in prison after she was convicted of plotting the overthrow of Iran's government, a charge that she, her supporters and rights groups deny. She had been under house arrest at her parents' home in Tehran for the last 2 years. Ashouri was detained in Tehran in August 2017. He had been sentenced to 12 years in prison for alleged ties to Israel's Mossad intelligence agency. His supporters and family have long denied this. Tahbas, a British-American conservationist of Iranian descent, was caught in a dragnet targeting environmental activists while visiting Iran in January 2018. The 66-year-old served on the board of the Persian Heritage Wildlife Association, a prominent conservation group in Iran. Iran convicted Tahbas along with 7 other environmentalists, including his colleagues, on charge of spying for the US. He was sentenced to 10 years and taken to Evin prison. Britain says that though Morad Tabas has been released on parole and is reunited with his family in Iran, this is far from sufficient, and it will continue to work intensively to secure his departure from Iran. Meanwhile, in France, the family of a French tourist jailed in Iran since May 2020 welcomed the release and urged French authorities to accomplish without delay what British authorities achieved. Benjamin Briere was arrested after taking pictures in a desert area where photography is prohibited and asking questions on social media about Iran's obligatory Islamic headscarf for women. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison.